The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show! So, has everything that happened in the last week changed your mind about voting for Bernie? Including the latest from Hillary? If you haven't heard the latest from Hillary, it's a doozy. And if you've heard it, and if it has changed your mind about being Bernie or Bust, there's a hashtag or two that are circulating now. Bernie or Bust is back, only Bernie. And then the old Bernie or Bust is still here. Bernie or Bust, unite behind Bernie. That one's older too. And I would recommend using all of them at once on Twitter. I would send them to places that Berners frequent and let them know that Bernie or Bust is back. I should add one more hashtag on my graphic here. It should be pissed yet? This is the time, I think. This is that turning point. I think it's a gift from Hillary that she attacked Bernie at this point in the primary process, because now we can have Bernie or Bust surging at just the right time. Bernie or Bust surging in July is no bueno. What we need is Bernie or Bust surging before the first primaries and caucuses even start. So then we've got people upset, and then we've got people using leverage in every state. Last time the leverage increased as the primaries went on, but it would be wonderful if we could get all the leverage going before they start. So let your boomer friends know, let your affluent, educated friends know, let everyone who might vote for Joe Biden, Mayor Pete, Elizabeth Warren, or Amy Klobuchar, let them know that Bernie or Bust is back, and they just can't have any of those. Show them yesterday's episode about the Trump swing voters, and let them know that those voters combined with you, the Bernie or Busters, will absolutely prevent any of their corporate candidates from getting elected against Donald Trump in the general election. Yesterday, we blasted an op-ed writer from NBC. Today, NBC brings us this wonderful news. Hillary Clinton slams Senator Sanders in new interview. 4 years since their rough Democratic primary battle, Hillary Clinton has not let up on her criticism of Senator Bernie Sanders. Clinton, the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee, says of Sanders in a new documentary that nobody likes him. That's why this trending hashtag is fun for you. I like Bernie. Bernie says his wife likes him on a good day. He was in Congress for years, Clinton says in the soon-to-be-released 4-part Hulu documentary, Hillary, The Hollywood Reporter said in a report. The Hollywood Reporter said in a report. That's good. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. He was a career politician. It's all just baloney, and I feel so bad that people got sucked into it. Woo! How do you really feel there, Hillary? Asked by The Hollywood Reporter in an interview released on Tuesday if her assessment still stands, Clinton said, yes, it does. Well, Clinton also criticized the culture around Sanders, as the 2020 presidential contender has had high-profile disputes with Democratic rivals such as former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat Massachusetts, in recent weeks. And Clinton would not commit to endorsing Sanders if he becomes the Democratic nominee. So there's a little bit of a distinction now between Obama world and the Clinton machine. Obama world said reluctantly that they would support Sanders if he becomes the nominee. I'm not going to go there yet, she said about potentially supporting Sanders. We're still in a very vigorous primary season. Nope, it's too late. Bernie's on top. Bernie's going to ride the wave all the way to July. We'll see a drastic shift. I think we'll see it in southern states most of all. I think he'll knock Nevada down when he feels the momentum from Iowa and New Hampshire behind him. I think he's going to win both of those. And the southern states and the Super Tuesday states, they'll see California go for him. And a lot of voters will start to say, well, that electability argument for Biden was a myth, wasn't it? And that's when the momentum will hit. It'll hit before the end of March. We'll see more attacks from the media. We'll see more rigging and all kinds of shenanigans. And more people will join the Bernie or Bust movement. And it's just going to backfire on them. All of this viciousness is just going to backfire on them. I will say, however, that it's not only him, it's the culture around him, Clinton added. It's his leadership team. It's his prominent supporters. It's his online Bernie bros. We're not going to let that one rest. And their relentless attacks on lots of his competitors, particularly the women. We got Bernie sisters. We got lots of Bernie sisters. That reminds me, I wonder if David Brock is going to jump back in soon. David Brock, he was a big deal with the astroturfing and all of the vicious attacks on Bernie bros. Now here's a cheap shot. Clinton said Sanders has not only permitted that culture, but is very much supporting it. So let's jump to this article. Sanders apologizes to Biden for supporters' op-ed. Zephyr Teachout is part of Bernie's campaign and wrote this article on corruption. It looks like middle-class Joe has perfected the art of taking big contributions, then representing his corporate donors at the cost of middle and working-class Americans. Converting campaign contributions into legislative favors and policy positions isn't being moderate. It is the kind of transactional politics Americans have come to loathe, she wrote. Zephyr is an expert on corruption, and everything she said is true. And Bernie, trying to keep the criticisms down for the people surrounding him who tell the truth, he apologized to former Vice President Joe Biden and said that he regretted the message published by Sanders surrogate Zephyr Teachout, who does not hold an official role with the campaign, but has endorsed and introduced the senator at his rallies. It is absolutely not my view that Joe is corrupt in any way, and I'm sorry that op-ed appeared, Sanders told the news channel. So back to Clinton. Clinton said Sanders has not only permitted that culture, but is very much supporting it. Not so much. No. Bernie isn't even willing sometimes to back up people telling the truth if they're close to him because he doesn't like this culture to hurt his chances at winning the nomination and winning the general election. The Sanders campaign did not immediately respond to a request for comment from NBC News. Clinton's comments were made public soon after Biden tweeted Monday that he accepted Sanders' apology after his campaign shared an op-ed arguing that the former vice president had a big corruption problem. Biden had also accused Sanders' campaign of releasing a doctored video of his past comments on Social Security and asked for an apology. We covered that in episode 198 of the Bernie or Bust Show. Thanks for acknowledging this, Bernie. Biden, a leading 2020 Democratic presidential contender, tweeted, "These kinds of attacks have no place in this primary. Let's all keep our focus on making Donald Trump a one-term president." But let me tell you, Joe, it's not going to work that way. Anyone who would vote for you, I've said it before, is privileged or misinformed. Anyone who would vote for Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg is privileged. We need to get this word out that the rest of us aren't going along with it. So we can pretend it's all a big, happy family and may the best woman or man win, but that ain't how it's going to happen. Because we have this combination of Bernie or Trump swing voters with Bernie or Bust pissed off voters, and we're not going to let it happen. There is no chance that anyone other than Bernie is going to win against Donald Trump because some of the Bernie supporters will vote directly for Trump and others will vote third party or stay home or vote in some other way. Who knows what they'll do, but they're not going to vote for a corporate candidate no matter who. Speaking of truth, Zephyr Truthout is right about corruption in politics. Let me show you a snippet here of another video that backs up her assertions, not only about Joe Biden, but just about both parties and how corruption is legal in America.
On this graph, an ideal republic would look like this. If 50% of the public supports an idea, there's a 50% chance of it becoming law. If 80% of us support something, there's an 80% chance. You get the idea. Now, most Americans would probably agree that, with a few exceptions, we should be as close to this ideal as possible. Unfortunately, the way America actually works, doesn't even come close. Take an idea that nobody supports, literally nobody, and it has about a 30% chance of becoming federal law. Now, take an incredibly popular idea, the most popular idea this country has ever seen, and there's also about a 30% chance of it becoming law. This means that the number of American voters for or against any idea has no impact on the likelihood that Congress will make it law. Put another way, and I'm just going to quote the Princeton study directly here, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. So if you've ever felt like your opinion doesn't matter and that the government doesn't really care what you think, well, you're right. But there's a catch. This flat line only accounts for the bottom 90% of income earners in America. Economic elites, business interests, people who can afford lobbyists, they get their own line. Look at how much closer their line is to the ideal. When they want something, the government is much more likely to do it. And when they don't, they have the power to completely block it from happening, no matter how much the rest of the country supports it.
That is even more important. If you look at the zero part of the graph, they get a lot of what they want. They're close to the ideal representation on the top. But even more powerful is their ability to shut down completely things they don't want. This part of the graph over here, where 30% of what we don't want gets passed, 0%. This is super important, and they don't stress it enough. They get 0% of what they don't want. And that makes a big impact on the way transnational corporations can function.
They get what they want, and guess who ends up paying for it? We pay for it with the most expensive healthcare in the world. We pay for it with a tax code that's a complete mess. We pay for it with internet that's slower and more expensive, with wasteful spending, a floundering education system, a catastrophic drug war, and 1 in 5 American children born into poverty. Almost every major issue we face as a nation can be traced back to this graph.
Yep.
How does this happen? Well, just follow the money.
And think about Joe Biden, follow the money, think about Joe Biden and his record as this next part of the video plays.
Now, it's perfectly legal to buy political influence in America. Here's how it works. Let's say a big bank wants a law that would force taxpayers to bail them out again if they repeat the exact same reckless behavior that crashed the global economy in 2008. Not exactly the most popular idea with the public, and Congress knows that. That should be the end of it. But that's where the money comes in. It's perfectly legal for our bank to hire a team of lobbyists, whose entire job is to make sure that the government gives the bank what it wants. Then, those lobbyists can track down members of Congress who regulate banks and help raise a ton of money for their re-election campaigns. It's perfectly legal for those lobbyists to offer those same politicians million-dollar jobs at their lobbying firm. Then, those lobbyists can literally write the language of this new bailout law themselves and hand it off to the politician they just buttered up with campaign money and lucrative job offers.
And jobs for their children. Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have children in the Ukraine.
And it's perfectly legal for those politicians to take the lobbyist-written language and sneak it through Congress at the last second. So now you've got a law that greatly benefits the banks, and the whole process can start over. This is how a bill becomes a law. A special interest hires some lobbyists, those lobbyists collect campaign contributions, offer jobs, and then write the laws that Congress then passes to help those same special interests. This happens every day on every single issue with politicians of both parties. In the last 5 years alone, the 200 most politically active companies in the United States spent $5.8 billion influencing your government. Those same companies got $4.4 trillion in taxpayer support. And that's trillion, with a T. And that's just the top 200 companies. Never mind every other special interest, every union, every trade association, and every billionaire. Every single one of them can use their money to buy political influence. You know, there's this idea out there that this only became a problem after the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision in 2010. But the data goes back almost 40 years, and the results are clear. Corruption is legal in America. And as long as it is, anyone who can spend money to buy political influence will.
So if you believe that a revolution is necessary to solve this problem, then get on the Bernie or bust train, because I don't think that we're going to vote our way out of it. I think we have to leverage our way out of it. And that's why we need an organizer-in-chief. That's why we need unions to become less corrupt, or not corrupt. We need to kick out our corrupt union leaders who are taking bribes and who are giving bribes to Congress to represent not workers, but represent the companies. The company unions are rampant. There aren't very many real unions. And you can tell right away, the unions who endorse Bernie Sanders are more likely to be real unions representing the needs of the rank and file than the unions that have endorsed Hillary or the unions currently endorsing Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden. I would say that's a really clear indication of whether they're a real union or not. So let's look at this problem and let's think about solving it not merely by voting for Bernie in the primaries, but by jumping on the Bernie or bust train. So, let's go back to this idea. Has everything that happened in the last week changed your mind about voting for Bernie? And you can say, on this, I'll link to this, you can say, no, still Bernie. You can say, yes. You can say, Bernie or bust now. That would be pretty fun if we all found this tweet, and I'll link to it, from Tobo's Bunny, and we can say, Bernie or bust now. And if you want to send a shiver of fear through the corporations, through the oligarchs, through the plutocrats, through Wall Street, through central bankers and hedge fund managers, if you want those few people who get what they want from that graph that we just saw and shut down completely what they don't want, then Bernie or bust is a good answer. Bernie or bust. Bernie or bust. Bernie or bust is back. Let your friends know.
Get on board the Bernie or bust train. Come get on board the Bernie or bust train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernie or bust train.
The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.